We ready?
Yeah.
Okay, call to order, September 23rd. It's been a while. And we have John Abbott, who is serving as our interim town administrator, and I think it's our first meeting with him. So do we have any additions, removals, or adjustments to the agenda? No? Is anybody here for public forum? Nobody is on Zoom that might want to chime in? All right. Good to go then with the report from Sam Robinson on the 2024 Mad River Valley Wellbeing Survey.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just gonna pop this up on the screen. Sec. I just learned how to do this over Zoom. Alright. Should be coming up now. Sorry, one sec. Let me try one more time. Cool, that should work. All right, thank you for having me tonight. As Christine said, my name is Sam Robinson. I work with the Mad River Valley Planning District, and I'll be going over the 2024 Community Wellbeing Survey results. And I know most of you here, but just in case someone watches this on the recording, for those of you who don't know, the Mad River Valley Planning District is a tri-town planning organization, works with the towns of Warren, Waitsfield, and Fayston to advance various planning goals and initiatives. And just to highlight a couple of the things that we worked on in the past, a lot of the times the planning district assists with different studies or helping towns address various identified concerns. The planning district itself can't regulate or enact policy, so a lot of times what we end up doing is gathering information and helping towns act upon the information that we've gathered, and the Wellbeing Survey is one of the ways in which we do that. To give you a better idea of some of the work that we've done in the past and some of the work we're doing now, the Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project is an example of some of the stuff we've been working on, which all of you are intimately familiar with. Josh has been very involved in that project in 2023, which has continued into 2024. A lot of what he's been doing this year has been dedicating his time to coordinating different aspects of the project relating to funding, also liaising with different federal and state grant partners, and he has recently taken more of a leadership role in the engineering and technical team as well, attending bi-weekly meetings and just keeping things moving forward. Another example of some of the stuff we've been working on lately, we've been taking part in the Iresville Master Planning Steering Committee, which dovetails really nicely with the wastewater project. The goal of the Iresville Master Planning Project is to identify different areas for infill development without compromising the pre-existing wetlands in those areas, and identifying a master plan in which we can kind of accomplish both of those goals. And then another style of work that we do is we also act as kind of a technical support at times to various towns. So a good example of this is earlier this summer in Fayston, when we had the flooding around July 10th, the planning district staff went out into the town and assisted the town with collecting data, with GPS collection, and then also just taking physical measurements of the damaged sections and putting that all into a GIS map and attribute table that the town could then use to kind of, once it was declared a federal disaster, they were able to use some of that information to hopefully regain some of that expense when it comes to repairing their roads. So those are a couple examples of things that the planning district works on. Before jumping into the results itself, I just wanted to touch on the definition of well-being that was used when developing this framework, when the project was kind of first initialized. So the definition they were working under is it considers well-being at the individual, household, and community level, and it takes into consideration things that shape people's economic options, so essentially their economic situation. Also just overall quality of life. How do people feel? How healthy are they both physically and emotionally? And how safe are their living spaces and just the spaces that they occupy? As well as how connected are they to their community? A little bit of background about the survey. The first time the survey ran was in 2021. and it was part of a larger project which is known as the Community Indicators Project. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit more detail in the next slide, but to put it simply, the goal of the Indicators Project was to identify different categories of data that were missing from an understanding of well-being and identifying ways in which we could measure those categories. But the survey is based on the Vermont Happiness Study. The Vermont Happiness Study is a statewide survey instrument that's been run in 2013, 2017, and 2021. There's a couple of reasons that we decided to base our survey on that. One, it just provides more regional context, so it can kind of act as a useful benchmark for us to compare our own results against. And two, it allowed us to avoid reinventing the wheel. This is a well-respected survey instrument, so by basing a lot of our questions on this, we could have some extra confidence in our own methodology. A quick note about how the survey is scored. The Vermont Happiness Study and the MRV Community Wellbeing Survey are both scored on a 1 to 5 point Likert scale, so 1 being the most negative and 5 being the most positive. So I touched on the Community Indicators Project on the last slide. I put this graphic that was created as part of that project up there. You don't have to read everything on there, but the main reason I listed it is you can see the different data categories that were identified as part of that project. Community connections, social infrastructure. These are some of the data categories that were identified, and particularly some of the things that are more hard to measure, such as community connections and social infrastructure. We sought to identify ways in which we could expand our understanding of that with regard to the Mad River Valley. These projects have been going on regionally and nationally for the last 40 or so years, since around the 1980s, and they act as a way for people to better understand their community, but also share this information more broadly. So there was both an understanding aspect, but also a way to empower people to make data-driven decisions. We collect a lot of information here at the Mad River Valley Planning District, but prior to 2021, most of this was housed in our annual data report, which you guys might be familiar with. That report draws heavily from sources such as the U.S. Census Bureau, American Community Survey. It's a lot more quantitative and numbers-based, whereas the Community Wellbeing Survey is more qualitative and subjective and kind of the unfiltered thoughts of the people that live in our community. So it complements some of the more quantitative information from the annual data report, and the idea is it hopefully gives us a better picture of overall well-being. In our case, I guess you could think of the relationship between the Indicators Project and the Wellbeing Survey as the Indicators Project was kind of a framework to identify those areas that we needed to better understand, and the Wellbeing Survey was the tool to actually go out and get some of that information. So, what does the Wellbeing Survey measure? I have a couple. There's 11 different domains. You can see them here. Some of the things that it measures are community vitality, which takes into consideration trust, safety, volunteerism, and belonging. You have governance, material well-being, etc. Again, the main idea is that these kind of more qualitative, subjective categories can help ground some truth in sources such as the U.S. Census Bureau, which particularly for communities such as ours tend to have a larger margin of error. So we're hoping that we get a more complete picture by doing this sort of cross-reference. And I also think it's just a great way to hear directly from the community. There's a section that in this presentation where we'll see some of those open-ended responses, and I think it's really valuable, and that's one of my favorite parts about this survey. The last thing about the Indicators Project I just wanted to quickly touch on, I know I mentioned a large part of it was enabling data-driven or data-informed decision-making. And in our case, the way we decided to do this was we created an online dashboard. It's called the MRV Community Dashboard. You can find it on our website, and we update this annually with the results from the annual data report as well as the Community Wellbeing Survey. And this year's results have already been incorporated into this dashboard, so you can go take a look at it, and it's fully updated. It still needs to be updated with the annual data report information though, which we expect to do sometime this fall. So quick overview of how this year's survey went. It ran from April 25th to June 6th, which is the same time frame that has run in past years. And it's geared towards full-time residents of the Mad River Valley Planning District member towns, so Facein, Warren, and Waitsfield. That said, I wanted to note we don't exclude others from taking the survey, so you'll see There were 84 part-time residents or non-residents that took the survey this year, but we've taken those responses out of our analysis, so we're only looking at full-time resident responses here. But overall, it was a pretty successful year. We were able to increase the participation by 14%, and we heard from roughly 12% of the Mad River Valley's full-time population. And just a quick note on the distribution of the survey, we did a multifaceted approach, so we did your typical places, Front Porch Forum, Facebook, email newsletters. We also had paper copies around town. We partnered with around 60 to 70 different local organizations ranging from schools to other nonprofits. And we also did a number of in-person tabling events at places like the Farmers Market, outside of Mahirons, and then a couple one-off events like the Green Valley Rally. So just to touch on how this year's survey went as far as respondent pool goes, this table here shows the 2019 U.S. Census Bureau population demographics on this right-hand corner here. And in the middle we have the 2022 respondent pool demographics as well as the 2024 respondent pool demographics. So just to highlight some of the areas we were either underrepresented or overrepresented, we were slightly underrepresented in the 17 and under category and slightly overrepresented in the 51 to 79 age group. Interestingly, we tend to hear from about 30% more women than men. It was 31% difference in 2022 and 34% difference in 2024, which is kind of curious. Regarding household income, we did a decent job of getting a representative sample. The largest discrepancy was in the 25 to 50,000 income range. It was 7% difference. For the most part, we did have other differences, but they tended to be in the 3 to 5% range. So I was pretty happy with that area. And then regarding the town of residence, Facein was slightly underrepresented when compared to Warren and Waitsfield, but it actually, when you compare it to its population within the Mad River Valley, was pretty close. And just again to point out, you'll see that other category, that just accounts for those 84 respondents that were either part-time or non-residents. So now we'll get into some of the overall domain mean scores. So when you think about those 11 categories that I listed on an earlier slide, this slide is showing the overarching score for each of those categories throughout the years. So we have results from 2021, 2022, and 2024. And overall you'll see they've remained relatively similar. There have been some consistent decreases. To give you some perspective, from 2021 to 2024, all domains decreased except for community vitality, physical health, satisfaction with life, and education and culture. These decreases were between 1% and 9%, with the largest decreases being in material well-being and governance. Those both were down 9% from 2021 to 2024. And when you look at the scores from 2022 to 2024, you see a similar trend. There are some, the majority of the domains decreased, but I'll show you the more granular decreases on the next slide. The largest decrease this year was in governance, but it was more so due to a negative shift in perceptions towards state level governance. This slide is a little bit easier for me to understand. So what we have is we have the domain mean scores for each year, and then on the far right we have the difference between that domain from 2021 to 2024. I've also color coded it, so red indicates a decrease, green is an increase, and then the darker the red, the darker the decrease, and vice versa for green. So overall, when you look at this, you see a decent amount of red, but I think this is one of the times that it's important to recognize that we do have that state level comparison we can do, and I think it's really important because what you see when you kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture is here we have the Mad River Valley most recent scores compared to the most recent scores from the state of Vermont. And when you make this comparison, you see that 90% of the 2024 domains were higher than the most recent Vermont data. We do have some areas we could stand to improve, such as material well-being, but overall, I think this comparison is helpful just to kind of get that regional perspective and see how we stack up
Could you
in the
go back
larger
one
picture.
slide for a second?
Go back one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering why governance is darker than material well-being. Since material well-being is
Oh,
actually
yeah.
the largest.
That's true.
delta.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an
But
oversight
that's-
on my part.
But that's what you were pointing out in the next slide in terms of the Vermont data, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
I'll look into that for the next
Yeah,
presentation.
I'm writing down that note.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on this or this? Okay, well, thanks for bringing that up. Oh,
So but that is
actually,
where it's red there, right?
so the reason why we didn't have governance on this slide is because we altered the questions. So the state of Vermont asked a couple questions that we chose not to include because I think one has to do with like corruption. Basically they weren't super applicable for our purposes, so we chose not to compare those domains from the Mad River Valley to the Vermont Happiness Study, if that makes sense, because we altered the domain enough. So now just diving into a couple of the individual domains to show you kind of how the report's structured and just to go over some of the findings that we picked out. We're not going to go through every domain because we want to leave some time for the open-ended question section, but each page of the report will have the title, the overall score, and then what that domain measured. It'll show the graph of the relative negativity or positivity in the responses. It'll also show a question by question breakdown, so that way if you see a domain decreased a lot or increased, you can kind of see what questions attributed to that increase or decrease. And then we also have some interesting findings from each domain. So kicking it off with material well-being, we saw that this was the second greatest decrease in the 2024 survey, and it was largely due to a decrease in the community's perception of the Mad River Valley's affordability. 50% of respondents either disagreed or strongly disagreed that the Mad River Valley was an affordable place to live, and 55% of respondents felt a moderate, high, or overwhelming stress about their personal finances. Oh, and compared to the state of Vermont, as previously mentioned, this was a 0.28 below the most recent Vermont score. The physical health domain had an interesting thing occur where the overall domain decreased by 0.12, but despite, if you look at the graph, you'll see despite fewer respondents rating their physical health as a 1 or a 2, we offset that positive change by a large transition of the 5s to the 4s, and to kind of show this a little bit more clearly, you can see in 2022, 45% of the responses were rated as a 5, and then in 2024 we saw that drop to 20%. So I just thought that was worth pointing out. It's still overall a relatively high score, 3.74, but this kind of caught my eye initially because I was confused to see a decrease when the graph shows relatively positive responses, but it is that just transition from the 5-point range to 4 is what is causing that decrease. And compared to the state of Vermont, we are 0.24 above their most recent score.
Can you just clarify the 0.24, that's not like a percentage change to Vermont, it's just the overall score?
Yeah, so
0.24 higher,
basically Vermont score would be 3.5 in 2021.
Got it. Okay.
The time balance domain, for the 3 years that the survey has run, this has consistently been the lowest domain. This score decreased by 0.1 since 2022. But when you look at the state of Vermont score, you can see we're pretty much on par, slightly above Vermont's most recent score in the Mad River Valley. One thing that when looking at this domain I found interesting was that 77% of respondents said that they spend some or most of their time doing things that they enjoy. But on the other hand, when you compare to the 2022 results, 4% more respondents chose disagree or strongly disagree when asked whether or not they have plenty of spare time. It's an interesting dichotomy. People are spending a lot of time doing things they enjoy, but they also feel kind of strapped for time, which I guess just to me kind of suggests people lead fulfilling but busy lives. The governance domain. So as I mentioned, it was the second lowest domain mean score and decreased by 0.27 from 2022 to 2024. But this was a lesser decrease than was experienced from 2021 to 2022, which was a decrease of 0.74. And this was mostly due to the most negative answer was in response to state level governance. If you look in the question by question domain, question by question breakdown, you'll see when asked about state governance, that was a 0.5 decrease. But some of the quick facts we wanted to highlight were that 49% of respondents either agree or strongly agree that public officials in the community pay attention to what people think, and 54% of respondents had some or a great deal of confidence in their local town government. One thing that I found interesting was that 35% of respondents neither agreed nor disagreed that they could influence decisions affecting their town. So some positives and some things to improve on, but those are just some of the things that I picked out to share with you all tonight. Oh, and again, just to touch on the question that Christine raised, we didn't compare the state level score to this domain just because we altered the questions and didn't think it was a apples to apples comparison. So now moving on to the open-ended question section of our survey, we asked 3 questions. One is, what are the strengths of the Mad River Valley? What are the challenges of living in the Mad River Valley? And what are the big picture changes you would most like to see to improve the quality of life in the Mad River Valley? And I will go into them now. I'll pop up a couple of them, a couple of the responses just on the screen so you can take a look at them if you're interested. There's over 400 responses to each of these questions, so I highly recommend taking a look at the report. There's really great answers, or not answers, but really great contributions and some really unfiltered thoughts, which I think you get to hear from a larger population than maybe can come to a public meeting or maybe would even speak at a public meeting if they were able to come. It just kind of opens the door more, which I think is great. So generally speaking, the people and community are what the respondents thought make the Mad River Valley special. We heard community mentioned over 170 times. It was the most frequently used word, and it was followed shortly behind by the combination of the words nature and natural. And then after nature and natural was beauty or beautiful, oftentimes used together. So kind of what I gathered from this is the respondents think we have a really awesome community, really beautiful nature, and the people and the nature and beauty here are what make it special. Question 2, what are the challenges of living in the Mad River Valley? The most frequently mentioned word was housing. It was mentioned 115 times, and not always paired with, but oftentimes paired with affordability and cost. That was another frequently mentioned one. 8% of respondents also noted a lack of some essential service. It's typically either pharmacy, medical care, or some level of transportation was frequently mentioned. And then somewhat frequently mentioned, but not quite as many times as these others, was a lack of either racial, age, or cultural diversity was also mentioned as a challenge. Oh, and here are some of the quotes that were pulled from this section. And then the last question, what are the big picture changes you would most like to see? Again, the top mention to this question was housing. It was mentioned 165 times. And following shortly behind that was a desire by 9% of respondents to better understand the impacts of short-term rentals or potential impacts of short-term rentals. And then another interesting one to me, which also I was looking back at the 2022 results and it was also highlighted there, was 7% of respondents identified the need for some sort of community center, whether it be a year-round recreation center or just a year-round gathering space. That was kind of caught me by surprise, but I found it interesting It's been a relatively persistent theme, at least from 2022 to 2024.
Is that sort of kid-centric or student-centric or just in general?
I think just in general. There was from looking at the responses, it seemed like to me it seemed like a majority were kind of like recreation centered, so probably kids, maybe adult basketball, kind of the whole community. And then high property taxes were also cited as a concern. But the next steps for the survey really are just to continue sharing this information. So we've already done, this is the 5th or 6th presentation to different community groups. I'll be going to the Warren Selectboard tomorrow, and we have either scheduled or are scheduling presentations with the remainder of this list here. If you think someone should be included that's not on this list, feel free to let me know. And apart from that, the planning district will use this information to inform our next year's work plan, and just continue to try and spread the information and get it into people's hands so we can continue to make data-informed decisions as a community. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Can you just give an example of how you use this to like inform next year's work plan, you just said?
Yeah, just like based on the projects we pick. So one of the, like this is a good example, like one of the things that was mentioned frequently in the survey is active transportation, and specifically the Vermont 100 active transportation corridor.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of continuing to work on that project. Also 9% of folks mentioned, or at least respondents mentioned, they wanted to better understand short-term rentals, and we've committed to the town of Warren that once they identify a vendor that they want to work with, we'll help them with data analysis to better understand that issue. So those are a couple examples of ways in which we could do that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, this is just a survey that kind of helps to inform some of the work that happens in the valley by various bodies. I'd seen somewhere on social media, somebody was like, they're gonna start doing stuff based on this. I'm like, yeah, no, it's a survey, not a statute.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned, I was like, planning district, we're information gatherers and information sharers, and we help when we're well positioned to do so, but we're definitely not, we're not in like a, we're there to share the information and empower people to make decisions that they see fit for their towns. Mm-hmm.
So the Vermont Happiness Study that this was based on, that's a UVM
Yep.
administered? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And did they conduct it this past year?
They did not,
okay.
no. I was looking for updated numbers, and 2021 was, they had a intern from the town of, or the Middlebury College. That intern ran the survey that year, so there isn't actually a formal report, but we were able to get updated numbers from them. So that was the last time they did the survey.
Is your guys' plan to do this every year, or like every other year? Or?
We're doing it on a biannual basis, so
Yeah.
the next time will be 2026.
Yeah, how much of your time and the planning district's time ended up going towards it?
In April and May, it was a considerable amount of time, and then in the last couple weeks as well, it kind of, I'd say April and May was pretty busy with this, and then I was able to focus less on this. I took some time to do the annual data report, and then once I had made good progress on that, probably late July, I picked back up on this, started writing the report. So it's hard to really say, but
I don't know that
Yeah.
I need a specific answer, I was just curious.
And one thing I will say is that Sam put a lot of time into in getting the survey out to people. So in-person things, and my memory serves, you baked a lot of cookies that you gave out
I
to
did,
people in order to entice them to fill out the survey. Time being in front of stores or other events, and time in the kitchen making cookies. But really focusing a lot on increasing the number and the representation of the demographics at the beginning. But it's we ran in 2021 and 2022, so back to back, and then realized realized, after that baseline, that it made sense to go every 2 years. And so that's the cycle we're on now.
Mhm.
And then you're still producing the data report, or?
Yeah, it's mostly done, or the collection is mostly done. I'm just waiting on information for maybe river health. I think that's the only category left. So starting to draft that report, and then that report, I think we're planning for a draft of it to be ready mid-October, probably for our steering committee meeting, then get that out shortly thereafter.
And you guys hang on to the raw data for a while, so if you wanted to do some analysis at some later point,
Mhm.
sort of based on specific town, for instance, rather than
Yeah,
doing the,
yeah, we definitely keep everything, so
cool.
as we get more, we could do some deeper analysis and kind of see how things have changed.
Great.
Yeah. Awesome, well,
All right.
thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, excellent, thank you. So next up, we do have the Village Wastewater Project update. Candace, were you looking to speak during the public forum?
Thank you. I really am just here to listen and just want to make sure I'm up to speed on what town's working on.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm running for state representative. For those of you I don't know, for a lot of you I do know, so for that.
great. All right, Josh, you ready
Yes.
to roll?
I thought I was connected, but it looks like I'm no longer on the,
On the Wi-Fi?
on there. Does it show them there? Okay, I'm trying again.
Yeah, admit.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Josh, good to see you.
Great to see you all. Good job, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Good to see you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Great. I'm gonna try doing the same thing that Sam just did, which is share my screen. Don't mind just holding on just a quick moment. All right, is that on there? Great. So thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. So I've been fortunate to be able to serve as the town of on behalf of the town of Waitsfield as the wastewater project coordinator. Team lead, a role I played since April of 2023 through March of 2020, until March 2024. Annie Decker Sola played that role for the spring through the bond vote, and then I've been back at it since July. So on behalf of the Planning District, we are very happy to be able to play this role in supporting the town of Waitsfield as it tackles infrastructure. I want to, there we go. I did share, oh, that's really fuzzy, isn't it? I did share in advance, it should be in your packet, a project update. So it's 3 pages with, or 2.5 pages with a bunch of attachments. And so the goal, so originally I had that and I was like, I'll just be here to talk about it, but I thought I'd throw together a couple of slides because it doesn't hurt to just make sure, one, I'm staying on task. But B, highlight a couple of items, provide some context for the next agenda item, which is the ARPA award, and answer any questions. So I always think it's important just to go back to the why wastewater and why this project. And these are the whys, the goals of the project that were laid out over a year ago and have been communicated throughout the project. But protecting water quality, safeguarding human health, easing economic burdens, expanding housing options, all the way through ensuring there's affordable user rates at no cost to taxpayers, and preserving our historic settlement patterns. So the what is the components of the project. It's wastewater collection, serving Irisville and Waitsfield Village, as well as treatment and disposal, utilizing a multi-stage in-ground treatment at the town-owned MUND site. And the project is designed not to burden the Waitsfield taxpayers. Instead, users will share the cost after deducting grants. And the town is currently and actively pursuing federal and state grants and a federal loan to be paid through affordable user rates. So planning and design has been going on since 2021. There's a Waitsfield wastewater project structure that has a handful of different teams. I serve in a capacity in each and every one of those. But our main members are Josh Curtis from the Select Board, Robin Morris from the Water Commission, Bob Cook, who I believe is on this call or was before, on the Planning Commission, J.B. Weir, the Planning and Zoning Administrator, and the project engineer, John Ashley from Du Bois and King, is involved in every piece of the puzzle as well. We have weekly project coordination team meetings and bi-weekly engineering technical team meetings. So first I want to give a summary of the 2024 activity, the things that are and have been and are going on. One, the municipal bond vote on June 11th, which was passed by a margin of 3-1. That's a major project milestone, permitting the project to move forward in the pursuit of all the funding needed. The second, planning district support. So as I said, starting in July, we put together a project structure and timeline, which was approved by both the planning district steering committee as well as the select board. Originally, I wasn't going to be, as Sam mentioned, I wasn't going to be playing a big role in the engineering technical team, but it's come to make sense that I am, so I am, and navigating and doing a lot of the sort of leading of that discussion, putting together the meetings, taking notes, things of that sort. So final design is where the project is now. There is that's the WCWP, Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project Engineering Services Agreement Amendment number 3, which is officially executed on the 29th of August, which allowed the project to get into this phase. And there's a handful, there are a lot of pieces to that puzzle, but that brings the project through final design next summer. And then funding updates, Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the intended use plan, which lays out how federal and state funds will be used to support wastewater. And that was finalized at the end of August. Included in that is a project priority list, which identifies the priority projects, and Waitsfield moved up about, I can't remember, 60-something to 80-something points, but moved into the fundable range this year in comparison to the previous year. A lot of that was related to where the project is in the process, that the town owns its own disposal field, that there's and going forward, it'll direct other funding opportunities like the ARPA Village Water and Wastewater Initiative, which the town has been awarded $2.5 million. This is very exciting, and it ensures that we've gone from feasibility to preliminary engineering to final design all through grants, and the remaining amount of the award can be used towards construction.
Was that part of the original funding stack at the point that we were?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it ended up being a little bit more than we were anticipating, but there was a moment where we were hoping for a little bit, well, we were expecting a little bit less, and another time we were expecting more, but 2.5 is great. And originally, they told us that our award was going to be $1 million, so it's very positive. So a couple of things related to what's going on now. The Munsite wastewater loading test. So one of the requirements of the indirect discharge permit process, which this project is within, requires the evaluation of the capacity of wastewater disposal of the disposal site to ensure that it doesn't affect the water quality of the receiving waters, which is the Mad River. So, so it is essentially a 2-month test of utilizing wastewater in a test trench, and essentially give it a test run. The results will determine the discharge limitations for the proposed facility, the wastewater treatment facility, and it is utilizing effluent from the Waterbury wastewater treatment plant for this test. So included in the packet was a detailed task list and a map, which is this map here. It required site clearing and a test trench, which is like stone, fabric, and pipe, that were completed this past weekend in the green box area. It did not clear that whole area. It's actually, I went there today because I was curious what it looked like, and it's actually just the width of a truck into the woods. And then a test trench inside there. So you can't see much from the road right now, but there will be a 21,000 gallon frac tank in late September or early October. Essentially a tractor trailer or holding tank. There's an image of what one looks like. And so that will hold the effluent, and then the testing will take place between October and November. So one, just letting folks know, we're moving forward, doing this very important test and to anticipate seeing some things there, and that's about all that folks will see, except for the occasional truck and individual running the tests.
Is that truck like pushed back against the woods there where the trench is?
Yeah. So there's a yellow square
Yep.
in the front of the treat area, and that's where it'll be.
Great.
To be back right up in there.
And so the testing is being run October, November.
Yeah.
Is the data collected in real time, or is that something that you have to like wait and then they?
So they're collecting data and then they'll be processing it.
Okay.
In November, December. Again, I don't have the task list in front of me, but it was an attachment to the packet, and I believe there was a timeline there for like the analysis.
Sorry, then I didn't have to my homework.
No worries, it's great. I just don't have it right in front of me
No, that's
because my
fair.
printer wasn't working when I was trying to print all this stuff. Anyway, the second is field work, so topographic surveying, environmental surveying, and cultural resources. So there was an initial topographic surveying took place over the summer, and starting this week all the way to the end of November, looking at additional topographic surveying, wetlands and rare plant mapping, and reviewing cultural resources. So these are all tied to permits and just recognizing and ensuring that there's a full understanding of everything along the way. And if there are major barriers or challenges as the design gets finalized, that these things are all part of the consideration. Most of the work is in the road right away, but Du Bois and King's field crews may require going onto private property, and so there's been notifications being mailed to adjoining property owners this week. 110 adjoining property owners. That's the map to the right with the yellow squares. Those are the property owners that adjoin where the line is. So included in your packet was also a copy of this map as well as the notification draft letter. J.B. Weir, Planning and Zoning Administrator, was the one who's collating, and when I talked to him around 4 o'clock, he had more than half of the labels completed, so anticipating going in the mail tomorrow. I also heard that the consultant said that the crews are likely going out next week, not this week, so we're okay timing-wise. The next is communication outreach. So there are a variety of priority parcels. I believe it was 105 priority parcels with existing systems that have risky environmental or public health challenges that were identified with the project. And there's been outreach and discussion with them, and they've been with the priority parcel owners, and overwhelmingly positive and ongoing. So about 75% or so, a little bit more, have responded to the initial outreach. And 90% of those respondents have expressed interest in connecting to the proposed wastewater infrastructure. So that is that tracks what we were anticipating initially. So there is a preliminary a document they're asking people to sign expressing their interest. The next is easements. So there are 4 pump stations located on private property that are part of the design. The engineering technical teams leading these discussions with the property owners, and all of them have been overwhelmingly positive. And the ETT will be providing easement recommendations to the select board this fall, probably in the late October, early November timeline. But we're working through, there are designs and then conversations with property owners and potential changes to design. And so we're figuring all that out right now, and there'll be more coming to the select board on that.
Are there any pump stations on town land? Or no?
No.
Wade House?
Well, actually, thank you. Yes, between the school and the White House, I'm still confused as to whether or not that's school property or town property, but it's right there on that line.
In the Blackberry Patch.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I think we determined that was at one point town property that got
Well, the school district owns the school
Right.
property.
Yes,
Yeah,
so the conversations have been with the school district directly, and recognizing that they own the vast majority, if not all of that. But at one point, that area was town property.
Right,
Right, but it was gifted or whatever to the school.
conveyed for
There was a
development.
boundary adjustment
Yeah,
fairly
There you go.
recently,
there,
but not recently, like 15 years
Yeah.
ago.
yeah, there's about a.
Right, but I think what you're bringing up is that the town, when it was a town school district, the town owned the building and the land around the building. And when the district merged, the town conveyed that to the school district, so.
Yes.
That's correct.
Do we know where the current boundary is?
There is a survey it has been surveyed.
Okay.
I can't tell you.
There's a boundary adjustment with the White House property and fire department and school at one point, so there should be a survey in the land records.
Okay, good.
So on the funding front, so one, like I said, the ARPA Village Water and Wastewater, and part of the reason why so this was the essentially trickle down money. So 2 years ago, approximately 2 years ago, the state identified about $35 million of wastewater money to go to a variety of different projects. It's before I was involved with this project directly, and Waitsfield was not identified. They've rescinded some of those, I wouldn't say they were, I guess they were commitments to projects that weren't far enough along, and given the fact that Waitsfield's project is where it is, like I said, in final design, owning its own disposal field and a positive bond vote, we were identified for this award. The town was identified for this award. And we'll pay the entirety of the final design through biddable contract documents to be completed next summer, with the remaining portion available for construction. All funding must be spent by September 30th, 2026, which was one of the requirements of the funding that a good number of the communities that were selected were unable to meet. It doesn't mean that the entire project has to be completed by that point, but the funding needs to be used. And contract for signatures, the next item on the agenda here, and officially is due on Monday of next week as the drop dead date. The second is USDA Rural Development, which has been eyed for substantial grants and the loans for the project. Application documents, we're in the process of putting them together over the next couple of months. So there was an initial application this past April, collection of funding, as well as some additional documentation has put us, we essentially have everything in except for one additional document, an environmental assessment document. And there's the field work that's going on right now will answer that. So we'll have a complete application being put together over the next couple of months. November 15th was the date that we've identified. And then that would be the next round of USDA Rural Development funding. Then next is CDS, which stands for Congressional Discretionary Spending. Senator Sanders and Senator Welch accepted the town's requests for funding and put forward CDS requests for considerations by the fiscal year 25 appropriations bill, but unfortunately neither of those made the cut at Senate appropriations. So we met with Senator Sanders' staff last week, who shared that the senator was very impressed with the town's proposal and the lack of funding had nothing to do with the quality of the application or its merits, and encouraged us to apply, assuming there's a next round of CDS requests in the spring. And then the last is regional project priority. So the Central Vermont's 2025 regional project priority list is due in October 15th. Which I'll be drafting the initial version of that, but regional projects that are economic and community development focused, there's a top 10 per region across the state, and it's used to help identify and match different types of funding, and increases odds for a variety of different funding programs, so kind of is a gate to get through. And I think almost my last page. Sorry, Chach, you're front and center. The town website updates, so the town website, on the front page, there's a section underneath the select board that says Community Wastewater Project, linked on the front page, and we've updated this past Friday, utilizing a lot of things that I just shared and things that were in the update. There's information on the first page, and then there is a fall 2024 activity page that goes into detail of everything from the wastewater loading test to the work, the field work that's going on. We've also included all of the project updates on the project resource and document section, which is identified on the right-hand side there. And then this is really my last page, which is just a summary, near-term activities. So ARPA, Village Water Wastewater Grant Agreement, MUN Site Wastewater Loading Tests, topographic survey and related field work, continuing priority property owner research, regional project priority lists, easement recommendations to the select board, and USD rural development application this November. So those are all the things. Any questions? That is it, Christine.
Right, I'm just teasing like that. Those are just a few things.
Oh, you were like, I thought you were saying like you got on long enough.
No, that was
You went-
sarcasm.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't pick up on it.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's what we're working on.
Just a few things.
So any questions about any of what's going on?
Is there potential for more ARPA money or?
My understanding is that is the extent of it. They were trying to get all of their money out the door. Getting contracts signed by September 30th, and yeah, we are fortunate to have 2.5.
Yeah, that's
we're
amazing.
we definitely tried to get more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the other, I guess I appreciate all the work, and there's
Yeah.
a ton of work. I guess I was maybe naively hopeful that all this Inflation Reduction Act, infrastructure, money, ARPA, I was hoping for more.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Well, there could be more.
No, I
Yeah.
think there's,
I mean,
Well, the
the USDA, right?
Yep.
And then it sounds like the congressional spending our numbers might be a little high.
So I asked the
Well,
question
that was
because our requests, we were encouraged, the town of Waitsfield for its application was encouraged to apply as much as you need. And so it was 7.5 million between the two requests. It was a $5 million and a $2.5 million request this past year. And I looked at the awards, and the awards were all like topping at like $1.75 million and below. So I asked the staff at Sanders' office, I was like, are we asking for too much? Is that scaring people off? And he was like, absolutely not. Ask as much as you can. Also in your application, identify if you will take lower, what that would be. For sure, figure all that out ahead of time. But it depends on there being a federal budget. It depends on a variety of things that are very much out of our control, and what they encourage is to ask exactly what we're looking for. And if CDS for some reason isn't an avenue, we've run it enough up the flagpole to let other funding sources know. So many funding sources want to be last in, which is where the Village Water and Wastewater ARPA Award is so great. Because it gets the project all the way to construction and into construction. And so we have that to work off of as a
And
foundation.
then somebody else can be the hero.
Exactly. We'll let as far as I'm concerned, everybody can be the
Anybody can be
hero.
the hero.
Yeah.
but we
have
have
enough
Right.
ARPA funds
Says-
to finish the engineering study.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yes. And money left,
Yeah.
and additional.
finished the design, not just the engineering study,
Yes.
but the full design, like
Full
100%
Two
design.
And
biddable
pro-
documents.
Yeah,
And ultimately could cover a little bit of the construction.
Yep.
Yes.
There won't be enough left over.
significant, like a chunk of the construction. It's not gonna cost us $2.5 million to get through the design phase. So we'll
Right,
have,
it was
we'll
only
definitely
a couple hundred.
And what's the
Yeah,
timeline
600.
on that?
have 5-ish. To fully finish the design would be like next summer.
Yeah, end of June,
Late
beginning of
spring,
July,
early summer.
Yep.
Yeah,
And those funds were the ones that had the
2026.
sort of deadline, the time sensitivity component to it, so.
right, yeah. But we've said this before, part of the criteria that the congressional direct spending is looking for is kind of shovel-ready projects. So to the extent we can
keep moving.
we've secured the funding to keep moving, get
Make it
through
more
100%
shovel-ready.
design. That should give us a better opportunity down the road with that and with Inflation Reduction Act, other grant funding coming out of that. So time will tell, but it's a
Yep.
critical step, like,
Yeah.
we can't emphasize enough the importance of that ARPA money. It's huge for us. We went from zero and thinking we'd missed the boat, remember 2 years ago, and Moortown was
Yeah,
awarded and stuff,
and they
to,
just gave theirs back.
yeah, now getting all the way through design into construction is huge for us, really huge.
Great. So with that, should we turn to approval of the ARPA money? So that, since we have Josh, if anyone has any questions, I know you've been through that contract.
Yep, I've read through the whole contract. There were a couple of small amendments on timing and such, so there's been some back and forth, but it's in great shape.
So the final copy that we're now good to sign?
Yep.
Okay.
Can I ask a question before we do? There was language in the agreement around the median income for the service area that.
So that was the very first question I asked them. So it identifies a number of the area median income. We did a lot of work on median household income last year, which is part of how we are eligible, which is a different number. It's actually like half that number.
Yeah.
And what we were told was this is a blank that they have to fill out for the feds, and they needed to use a particular source. So they fully recognize that we have an alternate calculation, which is allowed us through the state gate for funding, but this is a requirement for the federal side. And they want to use the source that they have.
But it won't affect their award.
Correct. I asked that question right away because I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
we did a lot of work on this previously.
Okay.
And this is all a grant.
Yes, this is a $2.5 million grant.
And
That's not
obviously
matching.
we'll need lots of additional funding to fully build out the project, but there's not a match requirement on this.
That is correct.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Okay. So are we ready to approve that contract? Somebody wants to make a motion?
Yep.
I'd make that motion.
A second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. I will go ahead and sign it.
Excellent. And John, do you have a copy of it?
I do, and you have the electronic.
I have the electronic
copy.
I have to sign, so I will do that in just a moment.
Great.
Move on to
Excellent.
the next one. Okay, so then next up would be the acknowledgement and acceptance of the Donaldson easement for the fire hydrant. This is a piece that we've been working on for a while. When they built that pond up off Ralston Road, the fire department came to us and got money for funding to put in the parts that needed to be put underground, so that they can now run a line out towards the road and install a fire hydrant there, and they'd still be needing to come to us to get permission for that part and funding. But we know we have the permission to move forward from the property owner, if we accept that.
Quick disclosure, may or may
Yeah.
not make any difference. I am in a butter of the Donaldsons. I don't anticipate that. Thinking through it, there wasn't any sort of conflict of interest that I could think of, but I wanted to put that on the table, just as a fact.
Was there a required notice to a butter?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so then I wouldn't.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
just disclosing.
Yeah.
There we go.
yeah, I don't know if there's.
So is that, if they put in the, kind of the T-junction or whatever they needed underground, that must have gone in when the original pipes were laid, so this was part of the plan altogether, all along? But
Yes.
we're just getting to it now,
Yes,
10
we
years later.
we had approved, and then we had actually said that the install of the fire hydrant's not gonna happen until and when there's an easement from the property owner indicating it's okay to put it there, and that we have, final specifications okayed with the road foreman.
We allocated money for this.
Not this part, no, we allocated
the
money
original.
for the first part,
Yeah.
so,
Which included what now? Please remind me. I remember
it's
allocating.
whatever pipes they need to run underground,
Okay, so it's
that would come
pipeline.
out, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there must be like a stub underground that they would be able to tie into.
So, we just need to acknowledge receipt, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing,
And, you already have, that's the form you have?
yes,
Yeah.
just, well, no, this is the, ARPA thing
Oh, yeah.
that I was looking at, but
Yeah,
for
that's
the
it.
purpose of the easement, it's, just
You
needs
just
to
have-
be, I mean, the Donaldsons sign it,
It's already been,
we
it's already
record
been
it in
signed and
town.
granted.
Um,
I'm waiting for the LTTR so that it can be filed, and Mariah's working on that.
Okay,
Who will do the physical work? Is it the road crew that'll dig the trench and all, or is it
No,
all third party?
I believe they're working with Griffin to do that as well, and he's trying to coordinate it with some work that he needs to have done on his pond.
Got it. And so where would that come, where would the funding come from in our budget?
Well, at this point, if it doesn't happen, we didn't budget for it previously, but if it's gonna happen in the, next year, next summer, we can actually put that into our fire department budget. Otherwise, we can see if there's anything, any funds that we can use this year.
It shouldn't be that much money.
It's like, I think $3,000 or $4,000.
Okay.
And it should be shared with Basin.
Good point.
Cool.
Yep. So, okay. Then next up would be the Bond Trap water line installation request. And Sebastian's here.
Hey, everyone. Did you all get a letter? I don't have any kind of presentation here or anything, but I have the letter that I think was passed on to everyone, and it's a fairly good summary of kind of what's going on, but so everyone's read that, or should I read it?
Yes, it was included in the packet. So
Okay.
I can project it to Sebastian.
I realize I don't have like I don't know if it's like helpful if I explain or go up on the board and draw where we're trying to put the water line in, but anyway, it's, you know, the reason I'm here is we've been trying to work on this project to get water to our cows in our main grazing pasture for a number of years now. Back to when Rodney Jones was the foreman. And my father and him worked on a plan to dig through the common road and put a water line in, and every year it kept getting sort of like, we didn't get to it, and even when Josh came on initially, I talked to him about it, and he said, yeah, I can do whatever, I need to with the roads, I can do a detour sign and we can go ahead with this. And then last year, I was like, all right, we're finally ready to do this. We've also been working with the state on basically a improved grazing system with waterers and fencing in our main grazing pasture across the street from our across the common road from our barn, and so that whole system requires that we have pressurized water going over there. And we looked at all the options in terms of going through a culvert down the road, but it'd be like a quarter mile down at the bottom of the common road where Palmer and Common come together, and there's 3 culverts we'd have to go through, and that doesn't really make any sense. And an aerial line doesn't make any sense because it's a maintenance nightmare, and with snow load and ice and plowing and just another thing to deal with. And so I've actually been making progress with Charlie. So I presented Josh with an option. Basically, I'm trying to make this as easy for the town as possible. I presented Josh with an option. Mike Marino has been doing other work at our farm on some other projects, and he put together a quote to do the work, and basically I presented him with like, we've got it all taken care of, we're paying for it, it's gonna be like a 4-hour job, at most it's a day job, but you can either do half the road or detour everyone, and he indicated that there's, it's a bit of he's short-staffed and everything, and it sounds like he doesn't want anything extra to deal with, honestly, but I'm just being persistent because we have to get this done. And so we've been back and forth trying to figure out what to do, but he said, you know, we don't do water lines under a town road. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, that's just not something we do. And then I got in touch with, because I asked JB, well, what's the next step? And he said, well, get on the select board meeting. And then I realized that Charlie Senior is the road commissioner, so we talked to him. And we came up with, we have a potential plan that could work. He wants to run a mole. So the other thing is, I've talked to 3 experienced contractors, Mike Marino, Chris Griffin, and TJ Kingsbury, and they all agree that there shouldn't be any issues with digging that water line and backfilling and compacting if you do it right. Yeah, there's going to be minimal settling. Charlie continues to maintain that he's going to be chasing it for years. There'll be a divot, and it sounds like more of an inconvenience, but the more I talk to him, I'm not sure if that's it, or he's more worried about setting a precedence about digging a water line through a town road. And so I'm just trying to understand where all the pushback is coming from. But Charlie has agreed to, so the other option is to do a directional bore, which is at least twice as expensive. So just to give you some reference, to dig and sleeve the water line and put it in there, the way I originally wanted to do it is like a couple $1,000 job. But to do directional boring is going to be at least $5,000. That's the cheapest quote I've gotten. So it's really expensive, and I'm kind of like, well, let's do what's reasonable. But we may have found a middle ground with the mole. Kingsbury's have a mole, which it's essentially a pneumatic device that goes and pounds the dirt, and it works in sand and gravel, but if it hits a rock or like a ledge or boulder, it's not going to go through. It's going to either veer off or it's going to just get stuck. Or Charlie is fairly confident that it'll work. He keeps saying, let's do this mole. And so I basically got things lined up to run the mole. But what I'm concerned with is, and we've had DigSafe, they've come, they've done their thing. My concern is I'm going to get stuck with a mole that's either stuck or won't go through, and then all the expense associated with it, and not be able to finish it if I don't have basically it signed off that. So TJ Kingsbury made what I felt was a reasonable suggestion. He said, well, we'll give the mole a shot, but you'll have all your equipment there, and if it does fail, you can just continue and you can dig the trench and backfill it and compact it, and then your job is done. You won't be stuck with a failed attempt. And so I guess that's where I just wanted to, because I've been having such a hard time getting this thing signed off on, and then the other thing is, it keeps going to this place where either Josh or Charlie is saying it's too late in the year, or it's going to be too late in the year, and it is once it's frozen, but it's still decent weather, and we still have some time. So Charlie and I have agreed on giving the mole a shot. He actually wants us to try to do it 2 or 3 feet, like fairly shallow, because this water line is not a water line that needs to be below the frost level. It's servicing above ground piping for cows that's 3-season. We'll blow it out. It won't even have water in the winter. There's no risk of it freezing and exploding or anything like that. So Charlie would like to try doing it 2 to 3 feet deep. But then you talk to other folks and they say, well, you know how those roads were built. The old stone walls were rolled right into them. And
I will tell you that whole road was dug out and relaid in 1998 '98 or '99. The first year we owned our house, they dug it out, put new fabric down, and then
But like that spot on the common road,
they did the whole road. That was before they brought in all the gravel from Roxbury. They
I
did
mean-
the end to end, I'm pretty sure.
so it's like, if that's the case, we might not have a problem.
Yeah.
I'm just here because I'm like, what do we do if the mole gets stuck and I'm stuck, you know, and I don't have permission to dig the road up and
Yeah, because
and Charlie's basically saying, let's go for it, it's gonna work, and I'm like, well, if you have that much confidence, then you should be okay saying,
yeah, give
you
me
know what
my
I mean?
backup. And I
Yeah.
do know. I mean, I've talked to Josh a couple of times. I haven't spoken with Charlie. They are concerned about trenching and just kind of like what it will do, like longer term. It might take a while to get the road,
Yeah.
you know, stable. And we're kind of in this unfortunate position. We have a class 4 road policy, which would cover some of this work, but this isn't a class 4 road, right? This is a class 3 road, and we don't have any ordinance or policies. So like, on the one hand, that tells us this is probably something we might wanna consider for the future, but that doesn't help you out.
no, and I'm not even asking, you know, I'm saying I'm gonna pay for it and everything, I just need authority permission to go ahead and do it, but I don't want to have to bore through because it's like prohibitively expensive.
Admit.
Yeah.
Oh,
So this would be
Um,
Charlie, probably.
So, yeah, and then, you know, to that point about the precedents, I did speak with Charlie, and I said, I was thinking about, you know, your comment about setting a precedent, and I understand that, like, you don't wanna just dig up the road to do a water line, like, every time someone wants that, but if we look at it, if we frame it as an agricultural precedence versus a commercial one, I mean, we're literally the last working farm in Waitsfield, and we need to get water over there to the cows, and I don't feel like this is setting some terrible precedence in terms of like, you know, the next commercial building or whatever is gonna have an easy time getting, you know, permission to dig a water line. But I mean, that's just my take on it. We have to have this thing up and running by like next spring. It seems like the fall, I was really hoping to get it done this fall. We have the dig safe there, we have Kingsbury lined up to come and use the mole. And, I mean, I can, fingers crossed and we can go for it, but if the mole has failed, that's the point of like, what are we doing? So I'm looking for some guidance from y'all.
When were you thinking of having them come out with the mole?
They could come next week. DigSafe just, cleared the utilities as of today, I think, actually.
Yeah, I saw this.
Whereabouts is it relative to the barn in Palmer Hill?
Yeah, so it's like directly across from the barn. It's on the high spot and we have a big pasture out there. So just south of like our farm store parking lot, but yeah.
So like I looked through, Middlebury has like a permit process and an ordinance, and some things that they require are like certificate insurance for both the business and the homeowner, and the town needs to be indemnified.
Because when I talk to Charlie and Josh, it's like they just need to okay it.
Yeah.
Also, and when you're speaking about Middlebury, I mean, is that an ag? I mean, is there a?
Right, well, I think the problem is like, what if the road's dug up and somebody gets in an ag? Something happens to, somebody driving their pleasure vehicle on the road because
Sure.
you've dug it up, and that
Well,
shouldn't come
I
back
would
on
I
the
would be
town.
hiring a contractor
Right.
with insurance. I mean, it's not a farm job.
Yeah, yeah.
Those three folks I just mentioned, any of them could do it. Mike Marino's on site working on some cow laneways right now, and Kingsbury is the only ones with the mole tool. So
Oh, go for it.
Question, thought if we bring the mole, it gets halfway through and hits a rock and has to stop, ignore the cost for the next 20 seconds, would it be an option to pull that out and then get a directional bore in to finish the job?
I mean, if you ignore the cost, probably, yeah, but now you're talking about like, you know, I don't know, a $7,000 operation, and it really only costs $2,000 maximum to do to dig it and backfill it. It's just not that complicated, you know. I mean, the thing that I can't understand is why I have 3 very competent, experienced, you know, private, like, I'm not trying to, like, I don't know, throw anyone under the bus or anything like that, but like, they're like, we can do this, we've done it before, and then when I talk to the road guys, they say, oh, I don't know why those guys always say that, you know, like, I'm like, you guys replace culverts all the time, and
yeah.
and they say, well, we don't like to, but we just have to, you know, and
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you were saying about it not being an active water line
mhm.
4 seasons of the year is probably addresses one of their concerns, because I think the
Oh,
aspect of it freezing
Yep,
and creating an issue in the road was one concern that they did have.
right, that's not an issue. It would, and that's why it doesn't have to be below the frost line either.
Right.
And I mean, we technically can try that mole at different depths too, if it doesn't get stuck. I have heard of them getting stuck though, and then you gotta dig the mole out, I guess, but.
And then I think there's just the concern about like any ongoing maintenance it might create.
Yeah, I mean, there
If it
shouldn't,
does, you know, start to sink, and then that's a section of road that they have to address going forward and kind of.
well, and it's a
who's
dirt
ex-
road, so it's not a paved road that you have to peel the
Right.
pavement off and then you're pave it and then it settles and you're like, you gotta add more pavement. It's literally a dirt road, so.
And if it's
Dirt.
well tamped, if the dirt is well tamped when it's put back,
Right, I mean, there really should be minimal settling, but, you know. And then, yeah, there's just a 2-inch, Schedule 40 sleeve that the 1-inch water line goes through. So it's, in terms of maintenance kind of stuff, you know, as long as it's put back together and tamped properly, you know, I don't know how much settling or an issue there is. I mean, personally, I'd like to put a speed bump there to slow people down.
Yeah.
You know.
So you're willing to try the mole first?
Yeah, I am. I'm absolutely willing to, and because if that works, it's a little more expensive, but it's pretty comparable, I think, at the end. And yeah, I just also I don't know, like, if you know, Josh, he doesn't want to sign off on it, but Charlie does. I figure I just need to bring it to you guys to make sure I get an official. I don't want to you know, turn this thing into like a big issue or anything. Also, I don't want to inconvenience any more than, you know, but it's an issue for us. It's costing us in multiple ways, and just like to get it done, you know.
And doing the mole wouldn't require you closing the road at all, or
No.
just a portion of it at a time?
Yep, as long as it doesn't get stuck, you know. But so TJ Kingsbury, he owns the equipment, and he gives us a 50-50 chance that it'll go through. That's why I'm here, because Charlie's very confident, but TJ gives us a 50-50 chance.
Is
So.
TJ also the person who was making note of rocks being just piled in,
Oh,
or,
yeah.
basically,
Well, yeah, I
is
mean,
he aware of the background information about?
Yeah, I mean, he's going under the assumption that there could be rocky kind of stuff there, and
well, it's Waitsfield Common.
Yeah.
There'll be rocks.
a lot of those old roads, I think they took the stone walls and
Yes,
pushed
they
them in and then built over them, and
Yeah, that's exactly what they did.
yeah, so it's a little bit of a crapshoot with them all, but I mean, well, and then I think Amber in here in her letter, was wondering if the town was willing to shoulder any of the existing costs. I guess it's like if we have to do something above and beyond digging either the mole or digging and backfilling, where it gets really expensive, is the town willing to step in to help with that? And I'm more just asking for permission to, if we need to, and if we go by Charlie's predictions, we don't really need to, but I just wanna have that.
Did Charlie, did he address the what if you do hit a rock, it gets stuck? Or is he just so optimistic?
Yeah, kind of, yeah,
It's Charlie.
yep,
Um,
so,
so I guess, I mean, like understanding that you're trying to move things forward and do what you need to do for your farm, there are, and you're willing to try the mole first. I'd be willing to support it. I mean, one, we need to make sure that, you have signage up for when they're working on the road,
right,
right? We wanna make sure that they're, you're working with contractors, so they should have certificates of insurance. I do think the town wants to be held
Additional
harmless,
insurance.
indemnity, and then just some sort of plan if there is some settling, how we're
Mhm.
gonna, or how, how you might deal with that, or,
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
they'd come back with the right gravel and, tamp it down and, before it freezes.
so, and I know
Before it's time
that's,
to plow.
you're hoping to do it next week, but,
Well, I mean, in the next, I don't know how the weather's gonna go the rest of this fall, but,
I
in
think
the
it's
next
gonna
couple
warm
weeks.
back up next week, so.
What's it?
So I
Yeah.
think it's warming up again next week, so,
Right. I mean, when you do the call and the dig safe, I think they give you like, a couple months or maybe it's less, I can't remember the number of days, to actually do the work. And the dig safe has to happen regardless of if we do the mole or dig through, because you gotta prep either side so that the mole can be accessed and.
Yeah, where I was going with the question on directional boring is, if the mole didn't work, would the town, we've had some ARPA money come back to us, ARPA money that we had kind of granted but then never got used, that's come back to us, whether we would be willing to kick in any of that to go with the directional boring to finish the job, which would presumably alleviate their road crews' concerns.
I just feel like it's terrible use of taxpayer money, but I mean, that's just.
but, well, and I'm assuming also that, like, if you get through with the mole, it's not like you're gonna have the directional bore on site. And
No,
it's-
exactly.
I think it's,
It would be another, you'd pay the
It's-
expense
that's
for
right.
getting the
It'd
mole
be-
there in a failed mission and.
right, and then you'd wanna trench from where you got the mole to the final. Like, say you get the mole 2/3 of the way through,
I
you
think
could
if,
just trench a bit, or no?
well, yeah, I don't know, actually. I guess it depends how it, possibly, yeah, you might not have to actually dig the whole thing up because the mole already went through partway. The thing is too, it doesn't necessarily go straight. If it hits something, it can kind of veer off.
Deflect.
And, yeah, so I think those are some factors that would like.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I do get what you're saying though, Touch, from a like future-proofing perspective, if we're, considering taxpayer money, absolutely. If there's additional maintenance that has to go into road upkeep afterwards, because basically, I don't know that it would come out.
How does this
I
differ
don't
from
think that's a
replacing
good
a culvert?
Yeah, and I
How
don't
does
know
this
that
different
that's a
from
good.
replacing a culvert? And we do that all the time. And you probably.
Yeah,
It's a
but we
smaller
don't-
trench.
And
It's-
yes, it's a smaller trench.
Well,
Yeah.
in terms of, you're talking about the work, not.
Well, after the after effects too, like, cause the culvert, you're
It
gonna get
requires-
settling.
Yeah,
um,
it
and the
settles.
grade-
It's a
Grader takes
bigger
care of it.
swath,
And the grader takes care of it.
yeah.
How
I'm-
wide of a trench would it need to be?
It's just a narrow bucket on a excavator, it's basically, because all that's being laid in there is 2-inch Schedule 40. It's just that pipe that's going down there, and then
So if you dug a foot trench, you'd be good.
foot wide. Yeah, I mean,
Even 2 foot.
yep,
I don't see a big deal in this. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill.
I mean, I think it might just be because, it's the precedent thing, maybe with,
Well, that's part of it. I think
but-
also knowing that it's a 3-season pipe.
mhm.
Originally, if you were gonna put down a pipe that needs to be there all winter long, that's a much deeper trench than a trench for,
Right,
what
and
you're
like by
talking
code,
about.
they might need to be cased in concrete or, something like that.
yeah, below the frost line.
Yeah,
That's a few more feet. I think that's maybe where the concern came from. But, I mean, I can see how the road crew doesn't want private individuals doing things to the road that are gonna necessitate changing their work schedule. I mean, if everybody in town did that,
We're talking about ag.
I get it. I'm just saying that, like, if
Which I
every,
consider a sacred cow.
well, yeah, a lot of people in the state do too. But if every agricultural organization did that, then pretty soon
Well,
they'd
we're
have.
one farm in the town, I don't think it's. a
We're the
big
last
problem.
one left that's gonna ask you about digging
Well,
a water line unless someone else, I mean,
I
That's
About
the
a
thing.
water line, but I'm just saying that if, 10 or 15 people did the same thing, now you've completely upended the work schedule and people get upset about roads and the work schedules as is.
And it sounds
And
like,
they're shorthanded and,
it sounds like part of the problem is also sort of whether or not we have a policy or an ordinance in place, and that's, I don't know if it's possible to sort of retroactively create policy after the fact, if we've already
I see
granted
this
it
as
that
a
precedent.
one-time thing, one individual. I don't see this
I-
being a reoccurring.
well, I do think if we do this, we do need to go down the road of having an ordinance and a permit process. Just because you can say it's a one-time thing and somebody can prove you wrong pretty quickly.
Why would
And
it
I
be
don't
covered
have-
by our policy on working within the right of way?
Because we don't have a policy for working in the right of way. We have a class 4 road policy. We don't have
We
a,
give permits for working within the right of way.
we have curb cut policy. That's the work we allow in the right of way. So we don't have an ordinance or a policy as best I could see. Did you find anything on the server
did not.
that would apply to this situation?
That sounds like an us problem.
Yeah, but I do
Right,
think
though.
it's.
Oh, it's very real, I acknowledge
Right,
that,
like if,
yeah.
if we give permission, I do think this then becomes a higher level us problem. Like it's an us problem that we do need to adjust or address.
Agreed.
Yeah, which is fine. I don't think it's a bad thing to have. But
What is the,
I just think we have to do it.
what's beeping? Oh, is that the microphone?
I don't know. So yeah, and I would just wanna make sure that we're covering ourselves in terms of some of the issues that an ordinance would address as far as indemnifying the town against any liability. And making sure we have certificates of insurance. Which it sounds like is not an issue, right?
I mean, I don't think so, because the contractor that I would have doing the work, they have that, they carry that wherever they go.
Right, and you must have insurance for your farm.
And we have farmer, yep, exactly.
Yeah, I think the issue the road crew's probably concerned about it would be next spring, that, when frost comes out of the ground, the thing settles and there's work that needs to be done to fix it, so that would be the indemnification that you're looking
Right,
for.
or somebody they're working in the right of way and somebody gets in an accident as a result of their work and,
That would be covered by the COI, the just general liability.
well, right,
insurance
but
thing.
that's, I could see a situation where somebody says, well, I'm
What
gonna
happens
sue
when
the.
the town replaces a culvert? That's, I mean, the town is carrying the insurance and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what if, you wanna be indemnified against them making a mistake. I'm not saying that they're going to.
Yeah, I'm just saying the commercial insurance of the contractor would cover that. I'm talking more about 6 months from now, the thing is settled and who covers,
That's-
who would
well-
cover that? That's what
I mean,
feels like
we
Charlie's
could,
concerned about.
we could put together a little, I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but like, we can address it, we can sign a little work contract that says that if it settles, we'll address it within X number of days, and, then that'll be on us, and, I'd be happy to do that. It's right there in front of our, I mean, we're gonna
Yeah,
see it,
you're
like.
right.
Get your shovel.
You're gonna
Yeah,
be running
You're
over it a
the
few
first
times
one.
a
Yeah.
day.
yeah,
I mean, that would, I think that would address
For
the
a bigger
concerns.
project, like getting some kind of bond or something, but I think
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
an agreement would be fine. to me.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
and I mean, if the mole works and everything, all this might just be kinda like a, sort of a non-issue,
Right.
hopefully.
But I appreciate the contingency plan component of this, like it,
Well, because you don't want to start the work and then just sit
Right.
there and go, now I gotta go to the board and it's mid-October and
Yeah,
frost becomes an issue. All right, does anybody feel like they can encapsulate that into a motion? Pressure.
Brian, you're so good
Yeah.
at this.
So we wanna grant approval to first try them all, and if that ends up not working, to, as minimal a ditch as necessary to install the pipe, to be restored at your cost to Charlie Goodman's and Josh's
standard.
standard,
Yeah.
approval. And that any kind of, I guess we'll draft a permit or, a permission, and that you agree that if there's any settling or other, noticeable, discernible damage to the road occurs as a result of this within the next year, you'll cover the
Address it.
cost of
The remediation.
bringing remediation back to the road
Yeah, that
commissioner's
sounds reasonable.
approval. Does that make sense?
And I'd second it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All
There
right.
you go.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Appreciate the time and,
Pray for no rocks.
what's it? Yeah,
Yes.
right. Fingers crossed. It is Vermont, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not as optimistic as Charlie.
I'm telling you, there's fabric underneath there.
Yeah. All right.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck.
All right, consent agenda.
Could you just let Charlie and Josh know when you're planning to do it, just so
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
aware?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Did anyone have any concerns with the consent agenda? No. All right, then. Then we'll consider that approved and go on to the select board roundtable. Anyone have anything for the roundtable?
Well, we had to install an emergency roof over to the waiting.
I saw.
We could actually see
The
through,
tarp?
yeah, the blue tarp,
Yeah, yeah.
the Adirondack roofing. You could actually see holes through. When they put the tarp on, putting the cleat on the bottom, they were using 2.5-inch screws, and they weren't hitting anything.
Yeah.
So there's a strong possibility that we get some roof boards, maybe structural damage underneath there.
Nice job with the video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You like the video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with respect to the Waite House, I was looking for and would welcome advice on how best to find the conditions assessment that Elliot Lothrop put together for it. I know that I have this memory of seeing it in minutes somewhere, and I have not been able to find it. But the conditions assessment that was done by somebody who was, I think, approved by Preservation Trust of Vermont to do sort of like a historic, because I think that Kathy Mahuron was asking for it. This is sort of me taking off select board hat, putting on Rural Resource Commission hat. I think we're looking for CLG grant funding this coming round to potentially help support a brick and mortar.
This was specific to the roof?
Not
or-
specific to the roof, this is just general Waite House, general Waite House upkeep, so I don't know what that's gonna look like. But
That-
my,
You're not talking about the big report that,
not the Cook report,
the
no,
Cook report, the one that was done subsequent to that.
correct, I believe it was in January of a year.
Yeah, and it's not that too many years ago.
No, because that was when
Good.
we were getting we got the quotes on the roof. I think that was right before, we applied for that other grant so that we
Yeah.
could,
Yeah.
and we had gotten the estimates on the roof.
And Blake, he really, he didn't have a good idea of, he didn't look beneath the surface, so there's not a lot of helpful information on
Okay.
the roof condition. I think the estimate on replacing the roof
The
was
subroof.
more
Yeah,
probably relevant.
It was more just from trying to pick out a brick and mortar project that the CLG could apply for based on the priorities that were set in that conditions assessment, which were not the same as the priorities that were set by the Cook report.
right. I feel like that conditions assessment was more regarding the roof.
Specifically.
But you might be able to find some of that information on the server.
Yep.
in the White House.
So I don't wanna add additional things to the collective plate. If you point me in the right direction, I can also do some of my own research, but
Well,
I
I
figured
think
I'd
the
ask.
problem is, when the website was updated,
Yeah,
you only have to have a year's worth of packets, agendas, and minutes on a website, so the migration did not go as far back as I
Gotcha.
think what you're looking for. But it should be in a file on the server, probably like the White House file.
cause that was sort of in between the White House committee and me being here, so I don't have it in my inbox
Yeah.
anywhere. The only other thing I had was,
I might, I'll have to look.
I don't know if anyone saw I don't know if it was VPR, the FEMA funding. Towns that applied for funds a year ago haven't gotten anything yet. So just as a sort of future-proofing thought, I think it's very likely that if damage occurs because of a natural disaster, that we would likely be out the funds for over a year, it sounds like, based on
Oh,
the
yeah.
timeline that they've
Oh,
got. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep,
That was a revelation to me, but I'm glad it's not a revelation to other
they are
people.
not timely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I surmised as much.
It's an even
We have to
bigger,
upfront it.
it's an even bigger bureaucracy. The bigger the bureaucracy, the
Yeah.
slower it moves. Did anyone else have anything? Mary, did you have anything else for the roundtable, or just that
That was
one,
it.
you? Okay. Did you mention the procurement policy in the town admin report, or no?
I did not.
Okay, because that was one thing that had occurred to me as we looked through all our policies
Brian
and
and I
ordinances.
spoke shortly about it, but
Yeah, and I had spoken briefly with Brian about it too. It occurred to me that our procurement policy numbers are probably out of date, and I did the research that our policy goes back a good 10 years, and so our limits for the different amounts are probably significantly lower than they could, or we might want them to be. And they are different from what, like, the federal government recommends as minimums, and I think the state as well. I don't think we'd wanna go as high as what they allow for a maximum, but to go from like $5,000 to $10,000 without having to put out bids or
RFP
get
and-
the RFPs. And right now, we're like, anything below 5,000 that's in the budget, you can just get estimates and move forward. Anything between 5 and 10, you have to at least get 2 estimates before you move forward. Anything above 10 is an RFP. We would probably wanna go to like anything above 20 or 25,000 as an
Yeah.
RFP, and anything below 10, you can just move forward with, and between 10 and 25 or 20 would be at least 2 estimates, because I think we're just costing ourselves unnecessary work if we don't bring those numbers up.
Yeah.
And even just by like a cost of living increase, those numbers match,
Yep.
so.
Makes sense.
That was the
Yeah,
only
I like
thing
that,
I
kind of
found.
0 to 10, 10 to 25, and above
The
25.
25,
That would-
Yeah, yeah, and there's some other stuff we have in there we might wanna revisit, but just changing the numbers, and policies are easy, we can change them all the time. Woo!
yeah, and in regard to the personnel policy, I felt like I needed a little bit more input from you all before trying to put together another final draft, but I do have I have the dog and the domestic animal.
What was
ordinance here.
what were your questions on the?
So there was some discussion about changing reimbursements for employees who have existing health plans provided through partner.
Yeah, I looked up those
domestic
numbers, and like the in lieu of payment,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think the guidance that I had found online was, our numbers were actually good, yeah,
Okay.
cause the recommendation is that you don't make it too attractive.
right.
What is
Don't make it too attractive to
to,
not.
to not take the insurance, like either take the insurance or, but our numbers are in line with what they recommend. And I think higher than a lot of places. I mean, why, it's like you wanna make sure that people are properly insured.
Vermont doesn't require you to carry health insurance, does it? Massachusetts does, I'm just curious.
I think it's, yeah, don't be like federal law now.
Is it really?
They got
Yeah.
rid of the federal, very small fine you would pay if you don't have insurance.
Okay. Were there other questions on it, or,
Not specifically.
okay,
Yeah.
and then, I think there's been more recently updated versions than the print version that Jen's had and has been looking for in that file.
I'll try to make sure I get
But
them.
that, when I did update the policy, and I had looked at that information as well. And so I think everything should be updated.
Great, I'll get you a draft for your next meeting.
Alright. Alright, did you have anything else?
No.
Let me just look quickly.
I guess I guess just a quick update on the rapid flashing sign.
Oh, yeah.
Josh and Josh met last Friday, and it seems like they're gonna be able to remove the sign that needs to be removed, and then as opposed to tearing out the whole foundation, they can just cut it at grade and bury it so it doesn't have to be lugged out of there. And then I think the idea was to revisit installation of the new sign in the spring. In the meantime, I'll continue to do research. As to cost, you had mentioned the possibility of not having a pole mounted sign, but trying to use the breakaway
Yeah, the current breakaway sign,
view brackets and all of that.
yeah, cause there are ones that screw right on. For that, and so the radar feedback sign that's coming out needs to be relocated.
Right,
So, and that can be relocated further south.
yep,
And I think rather than deal with like the digging and the running of the lines, we could probably buy one of the ones that mounts onto those breakaway signs for less than would be involved in
right, having a hard wire,
having to hardwire it. Plus it would be new.
yep.
And then my thought with the conversation on I don't think V-Trans, the Valley Players, the dance studio, she wants
Yeah,
to come
thanks
and
for
talk just
chiming in on
about
that.
that. I don't think V-Trans is gonna let us have two RRFPs that close together. But if we could relocate the radar feedback sign south of that building, then cars that are coming from that direction will see that sign at least. But I think most of this stuff can be mounted on the breakaway signs, just to make life easier.
When does the grant expire?
April of 2025, but who was it that was telling me that?
Can't remember if I communicated that to you or not.
I was able to find that one, but somebody was telling me they generally are pretty forgiving, but. We shall see. Okay. We ready for executive session? Somebody wants to make a motion?
Motion to enter executive session?
Second.
For personnel and
For,
confidential.
sorry, do I
You have to read the
I have to
whole-
read the whole
You
thing,
have to read the
oh,
whole thing, and then we're
okay.
gonna invite in the members of the Conservation Commission.
okay. So I move that we enter executive session pursuant to VSA 313 for personnel. And, does it need to be beyond that? Do I need to read the entire thing?
And do we have, attorney-client, you can put in attorney-client communications.
and for attorney-client communications.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, so we're just gonna wait for MRV TV to pack up.
Small,
Yeah, you
small
can get